Hi there, and welcome to this week's edition of The Wrap, simple news summaries for busy people, brought to you by myself, Verashni Pillay, and the Explained at Koza team. So, in today's Big Take, we take a look at the Sunday Independent's dangerous xenophobia game. The Sunday Independent is a newspaper that is owned by controversial businessman Iqbal Survey, and they're playing a dangerous xenophobic game. They continued an anti-immigrant tirade this Sunday with an interview with the leader of a party that is pushing anti-foreigner sentiment. The party is called South Africa First, and its leader is Mario Khumalo. This interview followed an extraordinary front-page story last week with the headline, South Africa Under Foreign Control, in which the writers of the article suggested that the number of migrants in South Africa was behind the country's unemployment crisis. Now, this is, of course, nowhere near the truth. In fact, we've done a two-part series on exactly why unemployment in South Africa is so bad, and you can find that on Explained at Koza. But, like all good xenophobes, Khumalo and his ilk pretend that their campaign seeks a return to lawfulness and an end to unemployment. But even a cursory inspection of the sources they quote, usually random people from social media with no facts to back up their claims of losing jobs to migrants, as well as the language used and the dangerous social media campaigns they run, show that SAF and their supporters are just spreading hatred and bigotry. For example, SAF is behind their hashtag Put South Africa First hashtag. This is a campaign which became a rallying call for South Africa's Twitter xenophobes. But with some careful orchestration in June and July, the hashtag morphed into a revolting display of bigotry as users got behind the sister hashtags Nigerians must go and Zimbabweans must fall. Now, this campaign was overtly designed to whip up anti-immigrant support using fictional Twitter accounts and fear-mongering. An investigation by digital forensic investigators DFR Labs uncovered the orchestrated nature of the campaign in July, proving it was no organic uprising of ordinary South Africans as it made itself out to be. Now, this campaign would be laughable were it not so dangerous. 12 people were killed in the September 2019 xenophobic attacks alone. Newspapers and their owners wield enormous power. Abusing the principle of hate speech to promote hatred and put people's lives and livelihoods at risk is an abuse of that power. Moving on to this week's big story, it's Ramaphosa versus Zuma as anti-corruption drive heats up. Last weekend marked what many have said was a game-changing meeting of the ANC's most senior council of leaders, the National Executive Committee. This was because it was essentially a clash between those aligned to President Cyril Ramaphosa, who want to see an end to corruption, and those aligned to former President Jacob Zuma, who apparently want to go on looting. Now, just over a week ago, we told you that President Cyril Ramaphosa wrote an impassioned but otherwise perfectly uncontroversial plea to ANC members imploring them to end corruption. Enter one Jacob Zuma, who found Ramaphosa's letter so offensive that he wrote a 3,000-word letter in return accusing Ramaphosa of trying to divert accusations from himself. If you're wondering what he's talking about, Zuma is referencing Ramaphosa's 2017 ANC presidential campaign, which was controversially, but to the best of our knowledge, legally funded by private interests. Now, Zuma was careful to make sure his letter was clearly marked private so as not to have his battle with Ramaphosa take place in public, but naturally the letter was all over the internet before it had even left the Nkandla post office. Another NEC member and Zuma ally, Tony Yengeni, called for Ramaphosa to resign on Friday. Now, Yengeni, of course, is an expert on corruption, having been convicted of it himself. So clearly Zuma and his allies were hoping that the anti-Ramaphosa sentiment would rub off on the rest of the NEC over the weekend. But Ramaphosa got the upper hand when he volunteered to appear before the ANC's Integrity Committee to answer questions about his election campaign funding. Now remember, Ramaphosa's fellow 2017 presidential contender, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, also had loads of private funding that she has not disclosed, but a list of her funders has never been leaked, as Ramaphosa's was. Now, you'd think being on a mission to clean up corruption, or at least be seen to be doing so, would be a good thing, right? But in the warped parallel universe of ANC politics, cleaning up corruption is highly controversial. And for those who try, they better make sure that there are no small Yana skeletons in their closet. But thanks to the political smarts of Ramaphosa and his strategists, Zuma's letter largely ended up looking more like desperation on the part of the state capture crowd. For now, they are on the back foot, and there's hope for Ramaphosa's cleanup yet. More on your news briefs. Parliamentary debates are meant to be lively and full of stinging back and forths between political parties. So when President Cyril Ramaphosa appeared in Parliament last week to face opposition parties, the gloves came off. Remember Musi Maimani's famous description of Jacob Zuma as a broken man leading a broken nation? DA interim leader John Steenhuisen whipped up his own tweet-ready insult by calling Ramaphosa a leader who goes from Mr. Talk a Lot to Dr. Do Little. Look, it's pretty funny, we have to admit, but things are still better than it was under the broken man, right? Last week, we told you how former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede was appointed to the KwaZulu-Natal provincial legislature despite facing criminal charges and being out on bail of 50,000 rand. We also told you that we hoped the ANC would reverse such a ridiculous decision given its latest cleanup drive, and it looks like they did. The ANC in the province asked Gumede to step aside pending an investigation on corruption and fraud relating to a multi-million rand tender. The ANC in KZN said it has asked all members facing accusations of corruption to step down from their positions pending the outcome of their investigations. This is a neat move for accountability. Moving on to justice for Nathaniel Julius. Nathaniel Julius was a 16-year-old boy with Down syndrome from Eldorado Park in Johannesburg. He was shot dead by the police last week. His crime? He did not respond to the police who questioned him while he was out buying biscuits, his family said. His death has sparked widespread outrage and protest in Eldorado Park as well as the Western Cape. Many people are calling for justice for Nathaniel Julius. Gauteng Premier David Makura stepped into the fray to say that Julius got caught between a shootout between the police and local gangsters, but the community is not buying it. South Africa's police watchdog, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, launched an investigation into his death and confirmed on Friday that the two policemen involved in the shooting had been arrested for murder and defeating the ends of justice. They made their first appearance at the Protea Magistrates Court on Monday. We mourn this terrible injustice, but are thankful for the small mercy of swift justice. In contrast, the US police officers who shot and killed African-American medical technician Breonna Taylor in her own home in March this year have still not been arrested. Rest in power, Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman, 43, famed for his portrayal as T'Challa, the superhero king of Wakanda in Marvel's Black Panther, but equally renowned for more serious roles, passed away on Friday after a 4-year, largely private battle with colon cancer. Boseman's death has been as profound and impactful as his career, during which he portrayed historical figures such as Jackie Robinson in 42 and James Brown in Get On Up. In remembering Boseman, former US President Barack Obama said the actor was blessed, quote, to be young, gifted and black, to use that power to give black children heroes to look up to do it all while in pain. What a use of his years. Now, moving on to South African politics, Herman Mashaba gets his party started. Former Johannesburg Mayor Herman Mashaba has officially launched his own political party called Action South Africa. Now, don't confuse this with the People's Dialogue, which is his NGO, which he also started previously. The businessman and now former DA member said his party was committed to fixing a broken political system. He also plans to contest next year's local government elections with a focus on the Johannesburg, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni metros. Mashaba has promised to bring more transparency to the electoral system by having the party's candidates elected by the public in an online system. He also wants to clamp down on illegal immigration, which is, as explained in our Take Above, a worrying platform. But love him or hate him, the Black Like Me Cosmetics founder is sure to bring more variety to our electoral landscape. And did you know that South Africa's biggest home is for sale, but not if its owner can help it? Are you keen to live in South Africa's biggest home? Now's your chance. The 6,000 square meter, 3-story high mansion is on the Vaal River and comes complete with its own golf course, 8 ensuite bedrooms, indoor and outdoor pools, a sauna, and conference facilities, to name just a few. Absa has put the property up for auction, the Financial Mail reports, but its owner, Kennedy Bungani, doesn't want to sell it. He's one of the wealthiest businessmen in South Africa, and he says he's challenging the auction in court. Thanks to various non-disclosure agreements, no one can really know how Absa got power of attorney over the house, but the Vaal Castle, as many call it, must have been a casualty, or the spoils, of a mighty corporate battle. Intrigue aside, we reckon it's the perfect COVID-19 spot. Acres of space for anyone keen to increase the social distance between them and the rest of their family. If there's a minimum starting bid, we don't know it yet. Better start saving your pocket money, just in case. Moving on to world headlines. Did you know that there are currently 160 COVID-19 vaccines in development, with 21 already in clinical trials? That's according to this week's Financial Mail. While the scientific jury has for months been out on whether you can in fact be reinfected with COVID-19, this week saw 3 people across the world confirmed to have been reinfected. This pushes back hope for permanent herd immunity or a lifelong vaccine. However, it does seem that those who have contracted COVID-19 once again experienced a much milder form of the virus the second time around. This presents us with two scenarios. One is functional immunity, where the immune system of a person exposed to the virus through either illness or vaccination kicks into gear on reinfection, making for a shorter illness and potentially lower risk of transmitting it, and therefore still helps making the pandemic manageable in the longer term. Or there's waning immunity, where the immune response generated by infection or vaccination is lost over time. We're hoping for the first scenario, but till we know for sure, don't take anything for granted, even if you have tested positive and recovered from the virus. Over to Japan, Shinzo Abe, the respected Prime Minister of Japan, announced his resignation on Friday due to ill health, leaving office a year early with no obvious successor. As the New York Times puts it, whoever replaces him will have to drive straight into significant challenges, but without the political muscle that Abe has built up over his record-setting run of nearly 8 years. The country's economy has taken a nosedive, and the coronavirus could yet rage out of control and force a second postponement of the Olympics, all while Chinese military aggression rises in the region just as the US, Japan's closest ally, is embroiled in a polarizing presidential election. In-flight menus come down to earth. Asian airlines are selling in-flight meals directly to the public, and nostalgic travel junkies are actually buying them. It's the result of some smart pivoting by airline caterers after the pandemic forced the industry to make a hard landing. Credit to The Economist for that pun, and shift to serving food on the ground. One airline caterer is so pleased with Fly with Meals, as it calls its retail wing, that it's opening actual restaurants in 3 big Indonesian cities. Moving on to your inspiration and solutions for the week. Finally, dolls that South African children can actually identify with, thanks to 2 South African women entrepreneurs. They call their company the Sibahle Collection, and they're here to celebrate the beauty of diversity, especially in our country. The dolls have realistic skin tones and beautiful natural African hair and attire, and some even have albinism or vitiligo. The message: to promote self-love and challenge outdated beauty stereotypes, one diverse doll at a time. And on to corporate wins. For a minute there, it seemed like domestic air travel in South Africa was dead, but 2 of the country's biggest airlines have just been given a lifeline. Com Air, which operates Kulula.com, and British Airways may return to the sky by December this year if creditors accept a business rescue plan to inject R1 billion into the airline. The airline industry was pretty much shattered by COVID-19, but the reopening of flights in South Africa would be a major boost to businesses and tourism and go a long way towards helping the post-COVID economic recovery. Finally, in your week ahead, several troves of very technical but incredibly important data will be released this week, revealing how badly South Africa's economy has been affected by COVID-19. Numbers from the manufacturing and vehicle sectors are expected, as are the anguished screams of economists who have to look at them but are frankly terrified by the story they're likely to tell. Meanwhile, the ANC is expected to release the outcomes of its NEC meeting at the weekend, and the DA is getting ready for its own policy conference, which will hold virtually next weekend. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.co.za, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the update at explain.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me.